Welcome back to the Five Insider with me, Joe Thomlinson. Look who's joined us yet again, the busiest man in football transfers. It is the brilliant David Ornstein. David, before we get into it, how have you been?
Yeah, sleep deprived is probably the best way to describe it. I've been to America and back for the start of the preseason tours, the MLS All-Star game, and then Lionel Messi's debut for Inter Miami, and what a debut that was. Now cracking on with the window and various other bits and bobs. So, yeah, it's all hands to the pump, pedal to the metal, and trying to keep abreast of as much of what's going on as I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Still over a month of the window left, so I don't think it's going to slow down anytime soon. But we should really start with, I think, is a massive story for Manchester United in their hunt for a striker that you broke very, very recently, and that's Rasmus Højlund. That a bid has now been submitted, but they might be facing a bit of competition, right?
Yeah, I think they've always been facing some competition, Joe. But Man United seem to be the sort of front runners in this so far. So they've made an offer verbally of 50 million euros plus 10 million euros in add-ons, a package worth 60 million euros. Personal terms are in place with Højlund. There is confidence at Man United that they'll manage to get this done. You'll have seen some subsequent reports on the day we record this that they hope to get him in for the start of the season in advance of that first match. But at the same time, Paris Saint-Germain have always been in the mix. They're very keen on him. They see him as a great young option. Of course, they could be raising some money if Marco Verratti leaves for Saudi Arabia. And so they have tabled an offer of 50 million euros. So that outwardly looks like a lower price than Manchester United's, of course, but we don't know the payment terms, etc. The view at PSG is that um, Atalanta are asking for unreasonable money and are unrealistic in their demands, which are in excess of 70 million euros. And so, if their offer isn't accepted, they're inclined to walk away from this. That's their mindset. They've made positive progress on personal terms for Højlund. Manchester United, of course, have that in place. So, uh, might look like a bit of a two-horse race, with perhaps Manchester United edging it for a player who has huge potential. He hasn't perhaps had the best season in terms of numbers, but we've all seen what he looks capable of doing, and United see him as an option to play across the front line in various different positions and sort of blend in with their existing options as a good player for now and for the future. And I'm sure PSG would see the same. So, yeah, Rasmus Højlund is definitely one who we need to pay attention to.
Now we've seen like Manchester United recently being sort of held to some sort of financial fair play restrictions. We've seen those reports emerging, haven't we? They've obviously already spent heavily on Onana and Mason Mount. Are they going to have to sell players before they can do a deal for Rasmus Højlund, or does it fit into that FFP way of thinking right now?
It seems that Højlund is within the budget, depending on what fee Manchester United pay if they are to get this transfer done. And certainly the noises coming out of Old Trafford is that they do have the money for this one. But in terms of subsequent deals, following the arrivals of Mason Mount and Andre Onana, you definitely imagine that sales would be required. And we've seen players like Scott McTominay, Harry Maguire, etc., all linked. Anthony Elanga going to Nottingham Forest perhaps helps their financial fair play situation. And we did mention on here a while ago that it was the word within the industry that United did need to sell before buying. That was in the context of what seemed to be an imminent takeover. And so I don't think perhaps the Glazers were looking to release the sort of budget that many would like to see from a United persuasion. However, now with the takeover situation seemingly slowing, we've heard no news on it in recent times. Of course, United and their ownership will have to look at what funds they can make available to deliver the sort of players that Eric Ten Hag wants from the market and that Manchester United need. So we don't know the exact situation. We saw that United got in a little bit of trouble with UEFA over financial fair play. So they're clearly treading a delicate line, but this is a massive club of huge revenues. And so you always assume, despite an overspend in the last transfer window, especially around Casemiro, that they do have a bit of maneuverability. Of course, like all transfers pretty much, there are staggered payments and installments that allows you to be creative. And the Højlund deal, if it happens, seems to be within the parameters of what United are able to do. Whether subsequent deals are, I think it's more likely sales would have to happen first.
Yeah, and those subsequent deals, we've seen heavy links to Sofyan Amrabat in recent weeks. Is that a name that Manchester United fans should keep an eye on, given, Kobbie Mainoo picked up an injury last night, didn't he? Scott McTominay's been linked with the exit. Fred's been linked with an exit. Donny van de Beek's been linked with an exit.
It's certainly one United have been looking at, and I think Sofyan Amrabat is aware of that. However, I don't think this has moved to the degree that some reports suggest. Personally, I'm not aware that a deal is close to being done or agreed, but perhaps it's one that could be acted upon in terms of a fairly reasonable price point, in a position that United might need to strengthen in it, as you say, if there are departures. So maybe that's one that could develop a little bit later on as opposed to immediately. I could be corrected, and they may manage to do it for the sort of numbers that are being talked about. But yeah, I do suspect that outgoings will be necessary if something like that is going to be completed. What might be happening here is that Manchester United are talking to a number of players for different positions. Maybe someone like Amrabat. We saw Disasi early in the window from Monaco as well. And they get outline personal terms in place. It's not uncommon. And then they see further down the line whether they can strike a deal club to club. And maybe this is United learning from past experience. You'll all remember the Frenkie de Jong situation where United agreed the club-to-club deal with Barcelona but did not agree personal terms. And that's ultimately what brought it down after a huge amount of excitement among the United fan base. So they appear to be operating in a decent way now, building out a squad that they'll hope will be competitive for Erik ten Hag next season, when expectations will rise off the back of winning the League Cup, reaching an FA Cup final and qualifying for the Champions League.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's stick in the north of England. I think we should talk about Liverpool because obviously Jordan Henderson's move to Saudi Arabia has now been confirmed, and Fabinho potentially heading that way as well. Although it did seem earlier in the week like that move could have been on the rocks. There's more positive chat about it now.
There was jeopardy over the Fabinho deal for sure, and reports suggest that it was to do with the finances, as is the case with many of these things. There was a commitment on all sides, as I reported, to still get this deal done, despite it stalling somewhat and encountering some delays, which I was assured was nothing to do with Fabinho's dogs. The rumor being that his breed of dog is banned in Saudi Arabia, and so that was going to scupper the deal. To my knowledge, that is not correct. However, despite a bit of a blockage in the negotiations, we are led to believe that that is now back on. And it's been suggested to me that it should be done and dusted this week. So that suggests within the next day or so. And that would see Fabinho head to Al-Ittihad, one of the PIF-owned clubs, while Jordan Henderson has signed for Al-Ettifaq, managed by Steven Gerrard. They are not one of the PIF clubs. And it sees departures from Liverpool's midfield. So the next question, I guess, will be whether there will be arrivals.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should talk about the potential arrival of a player like Roméo Lavia, where there's been a considerable amount of interest in Roméo Lavia from a number of different clubs, but it seems like Liverpool are the most advanced.
I'd say so right now. At the time of recording, we know of Liverpool submitting one bid of around £37 million, which was rejected by Southampton. They're seeking a package in the region of £50 million. And when I say package, that obviously means that you could potentially get to the right ballpark with add-ons included. So you sense that Liverpool aren't that far away. There is some optimism around this that a deal will get done. However, there is competition. There is firm interest from Chelsea. And so nothing is done at this point. Personal terms wouldn't be a problem for either club. But certainly they seem the two front runners, with Liverpool, just by the fact that they've actually got an offer in. Negotiations are ongoing. There are reports that a second offer has been made or is going to be made soon that would maybe take this more towards the £45 million mark on there or thereabouts figure. And so maybe that suggests that Liverpool is the direction of travel. But we'll see what these next days bring, because that feels pretty crucial as Liverpool tried to remodel a midfield that also lost James Milner. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain has been reinforced with Alexis McAllister, Dominic Szoboszlai just further in front. So yeah, busy times at Liverpool, ins and outs. And it would be exciting for them if they manage to get Roméo Lavia, because he's a 19-year-old of massive potential, already a Belgium international. And I look forward to seeing him develop in the years ahead.
Do you think that will be the last of their midfield business? Because, like you said, they've already had a lot of outgoings, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Milner. Now we see as well Jordan Henderson and Fabinho leaving the club. Presumably, they weren't quite as planned as the guys who were running out of contract. Is one player arriving to cover Jordan Henderson and Fabinho's exit enough, or are they going to dip in and sign another as well?
Well, I don't think either of them were planned, you're right, and that creates a bit of a dilemma for Liverpool. However, they do have many midfield options. I think it was 9 at the last count. So it was always plausible that some would depart. Maybe some thought it would have been Thiago Alcantara, but he's expected to stay at the club. So perhaps one of those that's leaving replaces that possibility. I'm not aware of more incomings. That's not to say they're not going to happen. It's just right now we've been looking into the Lavia situation. I think Liverpool will always be attentive to the market, and we've seen that in the past. They often pluck up deals that we've not been expecting. I remember how slick they were on Diogo Jota, Luis Diaz from under the nose of Tottenham. And don't forget that internally, you've got possibilities like Trent Alexander-Arnold, who appears increasingly at club and international level to be getting converted into a number 6 and doing a mighty fine job of it. So I would just say that there's no guarantees that Liverpool are going to make further additions, but equally, you wouldn't completely rule it out. I know people will say he's given a terrible answer there and sat on the fence, but that's the accurate situation as I know it so far.
Whilst we're on the topic of the Premier League, I think we should talk about another potential incoming, Mohammed Kudus, who, like Roméo Lavia, has an awful lot of interest in him from Premier League clubs. And I saw the reports this week that Chelsea are very, very interested in him.
Yeah, Chelsea came to the fore. Brighton had initially been the leading contenders. That one seems to have gone a little bit quiet. Chelsea are obviously looking to strengthen in their attacking midfield departments. And as I understand, there's been some dialogue with Ajax. There's also been dialogue on the player side that has made an agreement close on personal terms. Whether that has moved forward since then, I don't know. And let's see, because Chelsea will be surveying a number of options and Kudus is among them. I think Ajax, in an ideal world, would like to keep him. They've already seen a lot of departures, but I think he does want to leave the club. And so, yeah, that's one to pay attention to. You've seen Arsenal linked with him as well. I mentioned, I think, on this show that Arsenal had looked at him previously as one of their options. I don't know of any movement on that front. Manchester United too, he's one that they're sort of monitoring, keeping warm, along with somebody like Randall Kolo Muani, if they're not to get Højlund, but they're seen as backup options right now. So yeah, Kudus is certainly a player that is attracting a lot of attention in the market, but nothing is done just yet.
And it's part of that Chelsea kind of midfield chat I think we should get onto, because Kudus can play as a midfielder, can play as a forward as well. There's been reports that Conor Gallagher could potentially be getting a lot of interest from the likes of West Ham. We've seen an awful lot of exits from Chelsea's midfield. Where is Chelsea's midfield kind of additions at? Where are we at with that? Because Caicedo seems to be dragging its feet a little bit. Kudus is now being linked. Are they expected to sign multiple midfielders over the next month?
I would expect a couple to come into that department at Chelsea. They obviously had the N'Golo Kante departure previously, and Conor Gallagher, he's in a contract situation now with a couple of years to go where Chelsea either need to sell or renew him. Maurizio Pochettino suggested he's part of his plans, and people have been saying to me he quite likes him in terms of he's got a bit of an Argentine style about him, the way he presses, the all-action midfielder. But clearly it's one that Chelsea might sell if the right offer comes to them. He's been playing a lot in pre-season, but every player has their price. And so it wouldn't shock me to see him go. But equally, it's not out of the question that he stays. Where is the picture more generally? Well, Moises Caicedo, there's been no real breakthrough or development on that one. Chelsea, to my understanding, have actually had 3 bids turned down by Brighton, worth 60 million, which I was first to reveal, 65 million, and then 70 million as well. So they've been knocking at the door, but Brighton are not opening it if they're going to sell him. And there's been this suggestion that he's been assured since January, and that move to Arsenal that didn't happen when Chelsea bid as well, that he would be allowed to leave for the right price in the summer. But what is the right price? And clearly, when Brighton look at the departures of Jude Bellingham from Borussia Dortmund, Declan Rice from West Ham for in excess of 100 million euros, pounds, then they probably want something similar for Caicedo, who's a top player with even better potential, 22 years old. And so Chelsea aren't at that valuation yet, and something's going to have to give if he's going to move there. He's on Brighton's pre-season tour. He looks pretty happy, and so they drive a hard bargain. And Tony Bloom will never sell for what he believes to be under the value that he expects. We've seen Michael Olise mentioned in dispatches too with Chelsea of Crystal Palace. Now, there were reports that a bid had come in. I was led to believe that it hasn't come in, but there is concrete interest there. Obviously, he's got an injury too, which affects this situation, and Chelsea will have to ponder that. So I think they're juggling, multiple balls and spinning various plates. There's the young player at Montpellier as well. Suggestions that Chelsea have had an offer turned down for him. Would he be one to come in and then go out on loan? Busy times at Chelsea with the forward department as well, when you think about the Romelu Lukaku situation and what's going to happen there. Will somebody come in, or are they sufficiently covered with Nicholas Jackson, who's really shone in pre-season? Still maybe to bolster their defence off the back of the injury to Wesley Fofana. So as we said in the January window and last summer, don't sleep on Chelsea.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should talk about Crystal Palace a little bit because it is quite interesting at the moment, isn't it? Wilfried Zaha obviously has ended up not renewing his contract at Crystal Palace and moving on to Galatasaray, and now there's heavy interest seemingly in Michael Olise. Should Crystal Palace fans be a little bit worried here?
Well, they've got a good setup there. Steve Parish as chairman and co-owner, along with his American investors. They got Dougie Friedman as sporting director. They've done a good job in recent years in the market, and so I don't think we should underestimate what they could do in the rest of the window. But clearly, there's not been a great deal of activity inbound so far. I doubt that's for the want of trying, but also, they've got budgets that they need to adhere to in their own right. And they've also got a lot of good young players there at the club and a production line that I think they would like to tap into even more going forward. In terms of outgoings, Wilfried Zaha, I don't think that was a great surprise that he left. He was out of contract, and perhaps it was the right time for all parties to go their separate ways. And so he's headed to Galatasaray. Much bigger offer on the table from Saudi Arabia, but decided to take on the challenge of Galatasaray and the possibility of playing Champions League football, which of course leaves Crystal Palace with a hole in terms of creativity, in terms of goals, in terms of presence, because really Zaha was their talismanic figure. But for now, they've still got Olise, who they'll be reluctant to lose. They've got Eberechi Eze, who seems to be getting better and better, and a number of other options. And, I would back them to get something out of the market to strengthen and help Roy Hodgson. And now he's been confirmed in the role as well. And listen, Crystal Palace often written off and often confound the critics. So let's see what they do in the weeks ahead and then in the season too.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about a huge offer for Will Zaha from Saudi Arabia there. I think we should just finish upon the world record bid from Saudi Arabia for Kylian Mbappe. Where are we at with that situation, David? Is it likely he's going to go there, or are there reports that he's kind of refused to enter dialogue with the representatives true?
Well, we all saw the offer. It seemed unnecessarily high, given he's heading into his last year at PSG. If he's not signing that new contract, then they want to sell him. And so the Saudi offer went much higher than necessary. The reasons for that, make of that what you will. In terms of whether he would be interested, that's the main question. And I've not had any sense that it was something that would appeal to him. When you speak to clubs, across the game and PSG, everybody thinks that he's reached an agreement with Real Madrid to join them next summer in an ideal world for him, because then he would go without a transfer fee and be able to recoup most of that as a signing on bonus. But maybe something could be structured for it to happen this summer. It's a really complicated and delicate situation. And it was obviously a big story in terms of the reported proposal from Saudi Arabia, but I don't think it was ever massively realistic given his ambitions to, be one of the best in the world, play the Champions League, compete for the biggest trophies in Europe. And then, of course, there's an Olympics and Euros next year too. Some whispers that maybe he could have gone to Saudi for one season and then come back to Real Madrid. And let's see, because those reports you refer to suggest that his family have been speaking to Saudi and are open to the proposal, but maybe he's not so much. It's actually got really messy at PSG, and it's around Mbappe, and it's affecting what they're able to do in the market because of that. And so I think for all parties, some clarity would be needed ASAP, but that's not to say it will be achieved. And we could have this prospect of him sitting on the bench for the whole of next season and not playing, which is frankly ludicrous, and nobody involved would want that. So they'll be working day in, day out to try and solve it in some form.
Do you think there's any prospect we could see some situation where he's loaned to like a Premier League side for a year and then joins Real Madrid next year?
Many have raised that possibility. Whether it's realistic or not, I'm pretty doubtful. You've got an enormous salary there, which not many Premier League clubs, if any, could finance and comply with financial fair play rules. There have been suggestions that maybe only Man City could do this deal, especially if it was a transfer fee involved. Fee and salary wipes out pretty much every Premier League club. So, of course, they all like him. Who wouldn't like him? So there'll be interest from every club. There'd be admiration from Chelsea, from Manchester United, from Arsenal, from Man City, from Liverpool. But that doesn't mean they're going to be able to do this deal. I'd be surprised if he came to the Premier League. I think the common consensus is that one way or the other, he's going to be heading to Real Madrid. There's interest also from Barcelona, suggestions of a player swap because of their financial situation. Again, not one I see as being realistic, and Real Madrid should be considered the front runners. However, in this industry, you just never know what will materialize in the end.
Absolutely. All right, David, I'm going to let you get back to your phone because I'm sure it's going wild with transfer news. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure you do hit the subscribe button to the 5 YouTube channel. Hit like. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you later. Goodbye.